the West Coast, the East Coast, and deep in the heart of Texas. It's the Geek at Arms podcast with Brian, Mike, and James.
Greetings, everyone, and welcome to the newest episode of the Geek at Arms podcast, a podcast camped at the crossroads of Christian faith and geek culture. I'm glad to be back in the saddle with my good friends, Brian and Mike. Guys, how are you doing today?
I'm doing pretty well. Can't complain.
I missed you, James. I'm glad you're back.
I missed you guys as well. I've said this off podcast, but I'm going to say it here officially for the record, because everything we say on here is, for the record.
Will be held against us in a court of law.
Oh, yes. Heaven help us.
You guys did a great episode with our guest, Ken Monshine. It was fantastic to listen to. And thanks for covering for me at a very difficult time. Friends, for those who don't know, about the time that we were supposed to be recording the last episode with Dr. Ken Monshine, that was a few days after that freeze had hit pretty much the entire country, and including Texas. The difference between the rest of the country and Texas is that Texas is not built for that type of cold, and neither was my house, because when the cold hit, a pipe froze in my attic and broke. So much of my house got flooded, and I have been dealing with the aftermath ever since. But the good news is the end is near. As of the recording of this podcast, most of the repair work is done. And we've been staying with some incredible friends who have been letting us occupy their house. Literally occupy, like we have just moved in. We're like British soldiers saying, hello, greetings. We're going to billet 10 of us in your small room. And they've allowed us to hunker down with them these past 6 weeks. And this entire ordeal has taught me two very important lessons. Number one, that good friends are worth their weight in gold. The second thing is that I have way too much crap. I found this out as I was putting most of it in boxes to put in my garage. So the old flooring could be taken out and repair work done. And I can't count the number of times I've taken stuff to a dumpster or the Goodwill in the past few weeks. I mean, Marie Kondo has got nothing on me. I'm like, keep, throw away, give away, throw away. Just bags and bags of stuff made it out to the trash cans.
And I'm moved back in. Your house is going to feel cavernous.
Oh, trust me, it's not. All of the stuff that's in boxes in the garage, which is pretty much everything I own, it's going to be gone through once again. And even more stuff is getting gone.
I'm just imagining Brian trying to help you out, showing up to your door like, oh, these magic cards, do they not spark joy?
Here, James, say thank you to them and give them away. I'll just put them in my car. I'd be embarrassed if Brian got a hold of my magic collection. He'd be like, you had these cards and you didn't do anything with them?
Like, what is this Brian, Black Whoa, okay. Black Lotus is going in my pocket.
I don't have I do have a Bird of Paradise somewhere.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And I remember at the tournament I got it. Someone was like, dude, I'll give you cash for that. I'm like, no. I don't think so.
Okay, I don't speak magic. What does the Bird of Paradise do?
It costs only 1 mana to play, and it generates 1 mana of any color. So it accelerates your ability to develop your board and gives you more flexibility.
Mm-hmm. If I recall, you don't have to spend any mana to activate its ability. You just tap it, correct?
Right, yeah.
Oh, that sounds wild.
What is the value of the Bird of Paradise right now?
Value is such a subjective term.
Mm-hmm. What is some poor fool willing to pay for it on eBay?
$250.
Oh, my.
Oh, that's for a signed one.
Oh, okay. I was about to say, really?
So the bird actually signed it? How does it get the pen in its talons?
It's a very talented bird.
I guess.
It grips it by the husk.
The question we ask over and over again on the Geek at Arms podcast, how did we get here?
I am not sure.
Have we even opened the show yet?
I think we've opened the show. Yeah, we've opened the show. But I think this is where one of us says, well, that should about take us to Geek Out.
Thanks
I
for
think you
doing
just
so,
did.
Mike. Well done.
You're welcome. You don't pay me the big bucks for nothing.
Note to self: don't pay Mike.
Hey, Mike. Yeah, good call. Very good call.
Well, according to our show notes, which we reference so often, it looks like I'm going first by 2/3 majority. So I had a bunch of stuff for last month's Geek Out, and essentially I'm just going to kind of toss that aside because of what I've been doing lately, which for the most part, the last 6 weeks, I've been watching a lot of the TV show MASH.
Such a good show.
Yeah, it's kind of my comfort food TV show. When I'm stressed or when I need to just really relax and just not think, I'll put on a few episodes of MASH. All of the seasons are available on Hulu. I started back in season 1. And somehow I realized there was actually a good portion of season 1 and 2 I hadn't seen yet.
Huh.
And yeah, it kind of surprised me. So I got to see more of Henry Blake, the first CO in the first 3 seasons. And I've just watched a little bit more here and there, and it's been great. Like I said, everyone's got a TV shows or movies or music that they go to. It brings them comfort, it brings them peace and a bit of tranquility. And for me, that's MASH. Thankful I've been able to watch that. The latest Disney animated movie came out recently, Raya and the Last Dragon.
I've heard that's good.
It was pretty fun. I took my daughter to it because we have a local theater that I read what they were doing for what precautions that they were taking for COVID and how they cleaned and sanitized the theaters and how they were spacing their seats out. And I was pretty happy with that. And so we went, still masked up, of course, and we saw it, and it was fun. It's one of the few Disney movies that involves a princess where there was no singing. There was no song. She didn't break out in song every 5 minutes. I'm like, hey, I like this. This is nice. And good message. I felt like it was a little forced, but
It's Disney.
It's Disney,
Yes.
yeah. It got a little heavy-handed in some places, but still a beautiful movie to watch. And what else have I been doing? The friends who have let us stay with them, they actually have an HBO Max subscription.
Ooh.
Yeah, so it's actually made me. I've never had any interest in anything involving HBO, but I am, for the first time ever, am tempted because they have all of the Warner Brothers catalog, which means all the Warner Brothers movies, cartoons,
Oh, you got Looney Tunes?
all the seasons of the classic Looney Tunes, all of it. And the kids and I all love Looney Tunes, and some like early old school Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck and Porky Pig, and to sit on the couch and my kids watch this and just cackle just makes me so happy. But in addition to that, Joy and I hadn't seen the Aquaman movie with Jason Momoa, so we watched that with our friends. And over the past few days, I have watched the Snyder Cut of the Justice League. And it's taken me a few days because the movie is 4 bloody hours long.
See, it's funny. That's the way that my daughter and I watched Dune, even though that's a much shorter film. But do go on.
Dune's shorter? It sure didn't feel that way.
Yeah, it's all about perception. But I enjoyed it. I do think it told a more cohesive story than the 2017 Joss Whedon offering. It did offer more in the ways of character development and plot progression. But then again, if you can't tell a more cohesive story and progress the plot and have character development in 4 hours, then really, what are you doing with yourself?
And
Are you
another
in
3 years of editing?
Yes, I mean, are you really in the right career if it takes you that long to do that? So
I don't know. Ask Peter Jackson.
Ooh, shots fired.
I'll forgive him. I'll halfway forgive Peter Jackson because I'm still trying to figure out why you took one book and put it out over 3 movies.
Okay, look, I'm going to say this. I have absolutely zero criticisms for the 5 Armies movie of The Hobbit. I have zero bad things to say about the 3rd film.
Did you see it?
No.
That's what we thought.
I saw the 2nd one. I was good. Like, I'm done.
You're like, I'm out. So, yeah, it was a fun movie to watch, but I'm still not convinced that Zack Snyder was the right person to bring the DC universe to the screen, stylistically speaking.
Mm-hmm.
But that's my personal belief.
No, why not
And-
choose somebody who shoots only in monochrome for a 4-color comics?
Yeah.
Like, it's 3 colors you're not using, dude. Come on.
Every time I saw Batman fighting, I expected him to be kicking a bad guy off of the top of a building, into an alleyway, yelling, "This is Gotham!" Oh, all right. So the last bit of Geek Out is something that has not happened yet as of this recording, but I am so looking forward to Godzilla versus Kong.
Yeah, a lot
it's
of
a
my
movie-
friends are looking for that. I've
been waiting for it, and then I waited longer. I waited even more, and then I waited even more because they've kept pushing it back. It was supposed to have been out around this time last year, but it's one of the many number of things that you could say because COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
I'm
having to keep 6 feet of distance between both of those monsters during the restrictions. It just does not give the same sort of impact.
But it puts Godzilla at a distinct advantage, doesn't it?
Yes, it does. Godzilla's definitely going to be coming out ahead on this one. What's King Kong doing? He's squatted down. He's flinging poo. He's flinging poo, ladies and gentlemen. Oh, the humanity!
I thought you were going to go with rolling barrels, but no, here we go.
I might take this part out because really, aren't we above potty humor?
I did not get that memo.
The movie has already come out in China. It's made $25 million, which you would think is not a lot for a big budget monster movie, but considering the times we live in, that's actually really good. Early reviews have been great, and keeping in mind that this is a movie that is exactly what it says on the tin. It's 2 giant monsters fighting, and that's all it should be.
That's
You're,
right.
You're not coming to this movie for character development. You're not coming for Oscar-winning drama. You're not coming for a romance subplot.
I am going to jump in here because what I want out of this film is, there's going to be a fight at some point. Somebody's going to have to make them kiss and make up, and that's the monster movie I want to see. Yeah, there's movie posters that I've seen. They're fan posters, probably not studio approved. They want one question answered: will they kiss?
Well, yes, but due to Godzilla's atomic breath, King Kong's going to get one whiff of it, offer Godzilla a Chrysler-sized tic-tac. Godzilla's going to become offended and is going to march back to the ocean through Tokyo.
That was well,
Spoilers, man. Come on.
Yeah, jeez.
Oh, come on! Like that hasn't been the plot of every other Godzilla movie for the past 70 years. And besides, this is
I've been watching the wrong Godzilla movies. I don't remember the Tic Tacs.
There's got to be somebody.
Oh, come on! There's been Japanese tanks and planes been shooting them at Godzilla for decades. You thought those were bullets and mortars? No, those were all minty, fresh refreshment.
I'm thinking somewhere out there, somebody has got to be making puppet shows of monster movie rom-coms somewhere now. I mean, if not, I don't know. We need to get a Kickstarter for that.
Come for the giant monster fights. Stay for the giant monster fights. That's what a good Godzilla movie should be. Right. So I will give a more in-depth review of that next episode, but it'll probably be exactly what I just said. Come for the giant monster fight, stay for the giant monster fight. 10 out of 10 stars. And that's going to wrap it up for my Geek Out.
Well, I'll go next then. Way back in episode 3 of this podcast, we were talking about the Oculus Rift and the various problems that some people might have, specifically that conflict between where your eyes are focused and where they're crossing to determine how far away something is. And I mentioned then that there was a technology called Light Field, which I thought in 5 to 7 years from that time that was going to start making its way into consumer markets and would revolutionize VR, let people who can't even watch 3D movies, it would fix it for them. Maybe it would give enough visual comfort for somebody like you, James, to be able to watch without migraines.
Mm-hmm. And
I learned this week that there's a company, I don't know if the name is C-Real or Creel. It's all just in caps, C-R-E-A-L.
It's Serial.
cereal. It could be that too.
Yeah, it has a lot of shrimp in it, so it's that's okay.
Well, there's a not very evergreen joke. Probably already out of date.
It probably is. By the time this is published, no one will know what I'm talking about.
In any case, this company has a prototype right now, and it's not gigantic. It's not something that I would actually want to strap to my face at this point. But
It's the size
least,
of a 4-cylinder engine.
well, no, that was their previous model.
Oh,
where
okay.
they could only set it on the table and you stick your face up against it and you couldn't like move around or anything. It was so huge. This one you could actually conceivably put on your head.
I was just imagining, here, strap this to your face. I'm going to start it up. Insert sound of someone revving up a lawnmower. Why do I smell diesel?
It's going to be a different set of tech reviews. Like, tech I don't want to strap to my face, tech I could conceivably strap to my face.
We could get millions of views on YouTube with this.
Like,
When I strap it to my face.
Like, well, with this new Black & Decker Weed Eater, would you strap this to your face?
Today we're going to be using the Ninja food processor. This will probably also be our last episode. Brian, how are you feeling after that demonstration?
Well, he could answer us if he still had his lips.
The doctors say we can take the bandages off in 6 to 8 weeks, but we really don't want to. You can tell it's been a while since we've been around each other.
So you were reviewing the product here, Brian.
Right. So they think in about a year, the thing will be small enough that they can actually start shipping it to companies to integrate into actual VR headsets that can be offered to the public. So it sounds like my prediction of 5 to 7 years was spot on.
So
That's awesome.
You may have said this earlier, but how is this going to differ from the technology that we have right now, like the Oculus Rift?
Okay, so the way things work right now is you've got essentially a little TV screen, a few inches from each of your eyes. With the light field, instead of just making an image there, it replicates the way light actually travels through the air and reaches your eyes. So instead of just putting a little screen in there, you've got this actual projection of an environment. So your eyes can actually physically focus far beyond where the end of the visor is.
Wow.
That's really cool. There was a company called Lytro that was making a light field camera a while back. They unfortunately went out of business, but you'd shoot the picture and then you could choose where your point of focus was after you've already shot.
Jeez.
That's very cool.
And I experienced a little bit of it at SIGGRAPH 4 or 5 years ago. And at that point, it was all, actual giant projectors. And you could be there and you could move around to a limited degree and get some parallax in the image. Because it's not shooting from a single infinitely small point like a normal camera does. It's got an array of micro lenses on a pretty big lens so that you get a little bit of the actual, the way you move your head side to side and stuff at different layers of depth move differently. You can do a little bit of that even after the fact.
That's unreal.
No, it's not available for Unreal yet, but...
I've always been interested in getting an Oculus Rift one day, but I'm even more interested in something like this. Now, I know it has not been released yet. We're still a little ways away from that. Has there been any indication about what the price is going to be for one of these?
No, because they're not going to be selling directly to the public. They're going to be licensing this technology to manufacturers that have already got a pipeline set up for manufacturing VR headsets. My guess is that this will probably come in at about 30% higher than the existing tech at that time, which if the prices continue to do what they have been doing, I expect we'll be seeing the Oculus brand will probably be around the $200 mark by 2023. So then you'd expect these things to come in at probably around $300, if I were to guess at that time. They might be a little bit more. It depends on how complicated it is to construct the things, obviously.
Yeah. That's cheaper than the brand new Xboxes and PlayStations right now.
Mm-hmm. Of course, this is just the interface that I'm talking about. It's not a complete system like an Xbox is. You have to have the computer and then add this to it. Although I guess the Oculus Quest is the one that's an all-in-one thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I talked about that back then. It's like, I don't think I want to strap an entire computer to my face. Except now you can, and it's not that bad.
As much as I still would like to have one of those, I know that I'll be playing it for 5 minutes. I'll be playing a Star Wars game because honestly, what else am I going to play on it?
I mean, right.
Right.
And I'll probably brain one of my children because I'll be lightsaber fighting and just boom, just whack him right in the face.
Yeah, apparently Stephen Taylor of Games for All just did that this week to his poor daughter. He was playing Beat Saber and smacked her on the head.
What we need to do is just set up some stanchions around you, James.
And now she's telling everybody, my daddy hit me.
My daddy
Oh my
hit
gosh.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a hard enough time playing Beat Saber, hitting things that are like totally stationary in my environment. If I had a pet or a child running around,
I was about to say, you'd brain the cat so fast.
well, and my Middle Earth role-playing game has been progressing.
Nice.
How many of the characters are left alive?
Well, I did kill another one.
I knew it. None of you realize when it gets to Merps, Brian is bloodthirsty.
It's not me. It's the critical charts.
Yeah.
Actually, and it's the fact that I'm not rolling behind a screen.
Is your favorite part of the game the critical sheets? I mean, just asking.
That's everybody's favorite part of the game.
It really, I mean, I would make more jokes, but actually the critical charts are freaking hilarious. And he's not lying about that.
Yes, poor Aragost got his head bisected. And actually, there were supposed to be 2 other kills, but I kind of hand-waved them away because I didn't want to kill somebody when he wasn't even present to play.
You mean a second time?
Yes. Well, he was coming back. I didn't feel quite as awful about it with you because you were having to bow out on a semi-permanent basis.
Yeah.
It's like with the other guy, if you're going to kill his character just while he's away, just kill his character 3 sessions later. Just stick an F in front of the new character's name. It's like, oh, I'm your brother. His brother. I had this vision of him floating down the river, and I went to the boat. And then just move on from there, and he's back in the party.
We saved all of your brother's equipment and stuff. Here you go. Well, thank you.
That would make his name Glock. I don't think I want to pronounce that all the time.
Please do not. As it is in 3 countries, we're going to have to bleep that out of the podcast.
But anyway, the campaign is progressing. Actually, I might reach the end of the module, which I'm very happy about. I'm hoping that I don't have a total party kill next week, but it's shaping up to look that way.
I hear that as, oh, I hope I don't have a total party kill. Oh, no.
No. I actually have written into my notes, if I get lethal criticals here, I'm going to just mark them down as unconscious instead.
There you go.
Because the PCs have put themselves in a pickle and they don't know it yet.
Or just as soon as they're all dead, just say, you are standing around a table, moving war miniatures and units around, still looking at each other saying, well, that scenario went terribly. What else should we do?
If it was D&D, it's easy enough. You wake up in one of the hells and then we've got a nice new campaign to escape.
Right.
Doesn't work so well in Middle-earth.
Yeah, working in a system where there is no resurrection, he said after having run Star Wars so many times. Yeah, that.
Well, we can wait 600 years for Iradian to be reincarnated. Anyway, but it's a lot of fun. I'm really enjoying myself, and I think my players are having fun. They say they are.
I see no reason not to take them at their word.
Me neither.
I think one thing that you had said earlier on in the podcast, or maybe it was when we were on Saving the Game, is that the players are there for the purpose of having fun. Mm-hmm. So you're already starting with a stacked deck, and the cards are dealt in your favor. They want to have fun, and you're just facilitating their fun. So you're already starting ahead.
Yep, that is definitely true. I'm trying to work in as many scenarios in which there's no combat as I can, simply because, for one thing, that keeps everybody alive longer, and for another, as much fun as I find MERP, it is a clunky, difficult to run combat system.
Then just run it with the Doctor Who RPG's initiative system, and then you're good.
That could work. I don't know that there's quite as much technobabble in Middle Earth, but
I've actually wondered how it would work in a fantasy setting, because for those of you who don't know, there's an article that we have on our blog about it. But in the Doctor Who RPG, initiative is determined by what sort of action you want to take. So anybody who wants to talk goes first. So if anybody wants to talk the situation down or bluff or somehow evade combat that way, they get to go first. Doers, people who want to affect the system or somehow affect the environment, build a trap, make some there's no techno babble, but do a techno babble thing, they go next. Runners go third. So if you want to run away from the combat, you have your chance to leave. Then after all that happens, anybody who wants to swing a sword or pull a trigger, they get to go last, assuming that there's anybody still there in the room.
And now that game, I imagine, uses a much less... I never can remember, is it more granular when there's more pieces or less granular?
I think that it is more granular with more pieces.
Okay. So a less granular combat round where you're not, I swing my sword. It's more like I get in a fist fight.
Yeah, it is. I get into a fist fight. Then once you can have damage weapons. You can have just straight up, if you get hit, this is lethal, and boom, you're done. There is no other out. But they also have other ways of dealing with your levels of success and failure. So I would advise anybody playing Doctor Who, do not get hit, because there's not a lot in terms of health points, and it is easy to die, which is why it is also easy to avoid dying by not being there when people are killing.
Makes sense. We do have, it was kind of funny in our last game, last two sessions. I put this red shirt NPC in. He's 3 levels below everybody else. And he's just there to soak up a little bit of damage and die to make everybody, aware that, hey, this is a lethal situation. Well, he keeps stealing all the kills.
Oh, no.
This guy, it's like, they got in a fight with a forest troll. And, in Middle-earth, a troll is bad news. This little second-level puke one-shotted the forest troll.
Did at least one of the dwarves look at that and go, it still only counts as one?
Should have. Well, now they want to put him out in front all the time because he's so good.
I would. I mean, it's your fault it's not entirely your fault, but it's the dice's fault that they got a meat shield.
Yeah. And he did it twice. He killed a stone troll also. Jeez. At least somebody else got the chance to hit it first, but he finished it off.
Has he been given the nickname Trollsbane?
Well, I finally actually went ahead and statted him out and gave him another level just because I felt he deserved it.
The NPC's a higher level now than the actual characters.
Well, no, he's still got 2 levels to go before he gets there, but he does have a much higher offensive bonus because I know how to make a character better than everybody else does.
When he gets there, he's going to be invincible.
When you die, you get to take over the NPC.
Yeah.
Right. They'll all be fighting over it in this next session, I'm sure.
Well, I guess I'll bring back the NPC since he did die. Wait a minute. What are the dice doing? Now he's Trollsbane the White.
Right. So the third item in my geek out is probably like more of an item for all 3 of us. Are we ready to talk about WandaVision?
Yeah, it's been a few weeks. I think we're ready to.
I mean, if we need a spoiler warning at this point, then we really shouldn't be talking about the Hidden Fortress either.
Seriously.
And also, how are people even finding us? Because they're obviously not on the internet.
Yes.
But when I watched the first episode, and it's just like, okay, well, this was just an episode of the Dick Van Dyke Show. Why am I watching this? And I had to ask. I waited a couple of weeks and I asked on the MinMax Slack, is this show going somewhere? Should I give it some time, or is it just going to be a remake of old sitcoms with Marvel characters in it?
Yeah.
Funny thing, I was on board for that.
You know, I was fully prepared for it to be Wanda and Vision just take a stroll through Nick at Night.
I don't know why I was so cool with that idea.
I was waiting for the episode with the talking horse.
Oh, I feel like I missed out.
I
was really hoping for a Mr. Ed themed show, but or even just like an entire show, but just one moment, just a reference. But you know, we don't always get what we want.
Yeah, well, in theory, I'm down with that, but it was just like that particular episode. I don't know. It was all of the kinds of things about those shows that I didn't enjoy. I couldn't really put my finger on it, but it's like this just was kind of boring to me. And I think that they progressed the story it was just barely too slow for me. I think it was one of the people on MinMax, I don't remember which one, who said that, I think it was Ashley who said that she could have gone for even a little bit more of that. Now, if it had been 6 episodes of slowly pulling back the curtain, I don't think I wouldn't have stuck with it.
I feel like for me, I mean, again, this is just subjective interaction with the medium. It was paced just right for me. Like I was enjoying what was happening. And it's like, oh, there's also something else going on. You know, surprise, surprise, because it's Marvel.
Right.
But yeah, it was paced out just right for me. But I could also binge it because I didn't want to do WandaVision at first because I knew that it had something to do with processing grief and reality distortion and perhaps madness. And at the time, I just didn't have the emotional bandwidth for that kind of narrative. So I waited a while.
Gotcha. See, I went into it with the mindset of, this is going to be weird. This is going to be different than what we come to expect from Marvel movies and television shows. And when that was exactly what we got, I was actually happy with it because it was odd. It was, like you said, what we got was a brand new episode of the Dick Van Dyke Show. And as the decades progressed, I loved it. And when they started weaving in the outside elements as well, I'm like, this is completely different than what we got with, Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., any of the Marvel movies. And I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed that it was taking a serious look at supernatural, superpowered depression and loss. And it didn't joke with those subjects.
Right.
It took them seriously. And I appreciated that. And I thought it was overall very well done. I'm with you, Mike. It progressed at exactly the pace that was right for me. What I found myself wanting more of was Jimmy Woo and Darcy Lewis.
Oh, me too. Yeah.
I'm like, can that be the next TV show, please?
Yes. That's the thing. It's like that was exactly where I was going to go with this. It's like, it's not just we could have more of this. Like, why is this duo not their own team doing their own show? Like non-powered people's using their own resources doing good. I mean, and I love those two characters, especially Darcy. She was amazing.
Marvel, take note. We need a Darcy and Woo TV show where they take on supernatural problems with scathing commentary and sarcasm and close-up magic.
Absolutely. I think there was also something else about this show that I thought was absolutely the right time, and that's in our culture and our society, with the global issues that we're seeing, all of the societal problems that are being brought more to the forefront. We are seeing our heroes deal with grief, trauma, and loss when all of us are dealing in some respect or another. I mean, I cannot think of somebody who is not touched in some way by either grief or trauma or loss. And I don't think this show would have flown 2 years ago. People would have just said, what? But now it's allowed to hit home and live in a space that we're ready to process these things.
Yeah, the emotional weight of it was really resonating, I think, for the time that it's in, for sure.
So that said, bringing this back up, so more Darcy and Wu.
Yes.
Yes.
And
Sorry.
and if you can fit it in Marvel, I guess maybe let us know what happens to Wanda next. Whatever. Just give us Darcy and Wu first.
I read something on Twitter a couple of weeks ago where someone was complaining that the ending was, it's just another Marvel slugfest, and I was so disappointed in beating the bad guy by beating him up. And I'm like, did you watch the same show I did? Because what I saw was we beat the bad guy with philosophy.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there was the dramatic, punch out and shooting, and I mean, granted, they were shooting magics, but
even that wasn't a slugfest, because that was what Agatha was expecting, and that's what the audience was expecting, and then Wanda's flipped it around with her little trick.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I don't know where people are coming from when they were criticizing the ending of that show, because I thought it was brilliant.
I mean, maybe it was the fact that it was grandiose effects and there was grandiose magic, but I mean, you're also watching a Marvel show.
Mm-hmm.
You knew.
I'll be honest, when we were watching the zombie Vision versus the imaginary Vision, and they're going at it toe to toe, neither one really having a advantage over the other. And when it says, "Is your program to destroy Vision?" Yes, but I am a conditional Vision. I sat up. I'm like, oh, where's this going?
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, this is about to go somewhere I didn't expect, and I'm loving it. Going back to you beat him with philosophy. I'm like, wow, that's a fantastic way to end a fight.
Yeah.
And it's so very much in keeping with that character, too.
It totally is. It was totally respectful to the concept of Vision.
I think they should have more Marvel things where the outcome is you talk someone down.
Yeah. And I like that the white Vision didn't stick around. He made the realization, I am Vision, and now I have to go deal with what that means.
Yeah. Kaja had said, so whatever happened to him? And we're like, we don't know. Maybe
He'll
there will
be
be a
back
new
later.
show. Yeah, I mean, it's Marvel.
He's flying away to go read the 1960s comic books to find out what happens after he turned white.
And they really didn't, in the initial run of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they really didn't use Paul Bettany and Vision enough.
No.
And I was really disappointed that he got cut out of the story the way he did, as early as he did. It's like, he hasn't had time to develop yet.
Yeah.
And so I'm extremely happy that he's back.
I had that exact same conversation with a friend where we talked about the Vision is a physical powerhouse in the Marvel Comics, and Paul Bettany is a performing powerhouse on screen or stage. And he was just the most underutilized character in the Marvel movie universe. He shows up, he helps defeat Ultron, he bats around some of his friends in Civil War, and then essentially gets a spear through the chest.
Mm-hmm.
And his third eye ripped out of his head. And in a nutshell, that's it. And forms a relationship with Wanda.
Mostly off screen.
Yes.
I was very
Those are the
excited.
character highlights.
Like, I didn't remember them. Okay. I will admit I am not as well versed in Marvel. I have not seen every single one of the movies. I've seen the key pivotal ones. I did not even remember them being a thing.
They flirted a little bit right after Wanda joined the Avengers. And then there was just 2 or 3 scenes in Infinity War with them together.
I think I watched that while I was sick. So,
Well, there was
yeah.
Civil War where he cooked her a meal and was trying to be kind to her. And
Well, that's heavy-handed.
yeah, there were hints that there was beginnings of friendship. There was friendship there, but yeah, you could see where they were going with it. And then suddenly in Infinity War, they've been seeing each other off and on for a year and incredibly in love.
Yeah, we didn't get to see any of that relationship develop, so it just felt underhanded to take it away so early and so soon, which was 2 ways of saying the exact same thing.
They committed a storytelling sin. Don't tell us, show us.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But now maybe we'll get some of that again in future stories.
Mm-hmm.
So what about you, Mike? What's on your Geek Out list?
Having to switch tabs.
Man, when you geek out, you really go all in. Switching
I'm-
tabs, that's what I'm geeking out about right now.
Like,
Wow.
gosh.
Alt tab, and clicking them up at the top of my browser window.
Finding out he could open up 2 or 3 at a time. Mind blown.
What are you talking about? I had finished my one can of Tab, and I'm opening the next one. I've been saving these things for decades. Not as fresh as they were the first time around, I'll admit.
Wow.
All right, good night, everybody.
I'm suddenly reminded of back when we were doing Tales from the Loop. 80s brands kept on being brought up, and I actually found a 12-pack of Shasta Cola.
Oh my
and
gosh.
I bought that, and over the course of the game, I drank it every game night.
James is a method role player.
Twice in one episode, we asked the question, how did we get here? Anyway.
Gygax and Arneson and Stanislavski.
For my geek out, I wanted to take a little bit of time and talk about a game product that I had gotten, I guess it's a year ago now at PAX. At the time, our D6 RPG was on hiatus, and so my youngest wanted me to keep an eye out for something that would be something that had an RPG feel that we could play as a family, but wouldn't be as demanding as let's come up with a campaign and let's do character, because I just didn't have the bandwidth at the time to do something entirely new. And I bought something, but then our campaign started up again. So, this has been sitting on the shelf for a while. And what I had picked up was something called Emberwind. And I picked up Emberwind Skies of Axia, which is, it promotes itself as a GM-less RPG system / campaign book. And it works something between an RPG and a choose your own adventure. And I say that in a positive sense, because if you say that you've got a campaign book and it's just another solo adventure, it's just a choose your own adventure, that could go pretty lame, or it could go pretty well. And this goes well enough that it scratches just the right itch for us to play through a story and has a really good combat system. So we get a little bit of feeling like we have enough agency to drive how we're going through this narrative, even though that we know that it's still kind of on the rails. You're gonna get into a combat here. It has a combat map. It has you printed up. So, I mean, be ashamed to spend the ink and not use it, right? And it's actually got a pretty sophisticated system for dealing with its NPCs. And when you're on the battle map and you've got pretty dictated places where the NPCs are on the map, you roll a d6 and it's got this hex map of how they interact. So it starts with a base movement, and then depending on whether you roll 1 through 6, you go through this chart that says, well, then they do this, then they do this. Their behavior is they always go for the weakest character, or the character that last hit them, or the one who is doing the most. It has it has a branch in terms of how of their own NPC logic, and it's fun. It's based on D&D-ish in terms of its combat mechanics, but really slimmed down. And also, I kind of feel like they're trying hard to make sure that they're not D&D by having it be a roll under system rather than a roll over system. And so in one combat, we had a friend who was with us, and he rolls. He's like, nice, natural 20. How much damage do I do? And I'm like, none. You missed. Like, wait, what? It's like, yeah, 1s and 2s are good. 8s and 9s are okay. 20s are you don't want a 20. Just like you could, it's almost like the sound of a deflating balloon flying around the room. But it's pretty cool because you roll a 1, 2, or 3 depending on your character. You crit if you and you do max damage if you roll underneath something called penetration. Like if you have like a penetration value of like 10 or 8, well, you plow through their damage resistance, and after a certain point you just hit, and then after a certain point you just miss. So it's rewarding to have that die roll and then something happen based on how well you rolled, without having to add in all kinds of other modifiers of a +2 for this, or a +3 for this, or adding this feat and this talent with this feat and this talent. And so you wind up with a +8 when you are within 6 squares of an ally who is armed with a melee weapon, while you have an opponent that is adjacent with another opponent less than 6 squares away when armed only with a banana.
So you're saying you don't want to play MERP?
Talk to me more about the banana, then maybe.
I think I said about all I can say about bananas on this podcast previously.
Okay. So
it's a slippery subject.
So anyway, it's fun. I like it. We're about halfway through the campaign book, and we're planning on getting the next one once we finish it out. It's good because we don't have to have a GM, and we're all enjoying it for what it is. So if you're looking for a fully fleshed out RPG, it can go that direction. It has other books to help make it that, but that's not what I want to do. So I just don't have the bandwidth in that. So it's the perfect product for me.
Gotcha.
Also, something that is finally on my reading list, and it's something that you talked about, James, a little bit, so I'm not going to go too much into detail, and also something that my friend Sydney has been pushing into my hands. So if James and Sydney say I need to read this book, then I need to read His Majesty's Dragon.
Yes.
I am really liking this thing. It's just a brief overview for you listeners who don't feel like flipping all the way back to the episode when we were talking about Into the Spider-Verse. It is about, I think it's kind of historicalish fantasy. Like it's set in a time and a place during the Napoleonic Wars, and it's following this English naval officer who has captured this enemy ship, and on board this French ship is a dragon egg, and it hatches and it gets attached to him. And so now he has to switch branches of the military, which is a huge culture shift, because now he has to be an aviator, because apparently once a dragon fixates on you, you can't hand the dragon off to somebody else. You're best buds forever until one of you dies, or maybe both of you, who knows. So it's a journey of discovery, and it's this journey of camaraderie as they're both trying to adjust to this new life in this new place in the backdrop of the Napoleonic Wars. So I'm about halfway through it. I'm really enjoying it.
They've been a great series of books from Naomi Novik.
Yes.
And I've read most of them. There are, I believe, 9 books in the series. Cow. Yeah, His Majesty's Dragon is the first, and I think I read the second to last one that came out, Blood of Tyrants. I know there was one released a few years ago. I don't know if it wrapped it up or not. It came out at a time that I was reading several other books as well, so I haven't gotten around to it. But it's great. I mean, it's exactly what you described, the Napoleonic Wars, but with Dragon Air Force.
Now, this was the same author as Spinning Silver, I think.
Yes.
That you recommended
Absolutely.
in the past.
Yes. I cannot recommend Spinning Silver enough. Naomi Novik is just an incredible author, and she has a way of tailoring her writing style to really fit the emotional tenor of what she's talking about. Mm-hmm. So I wouldn't have even identified that this was the same author if I hadn't known it. I mean, like, you know how you see some actors and the characters that they portray are so different from each other that you think that can't be the same person. Mm-hmm. And yet it is. Just the style of presenting the characters and the way that she presents her prose is such that I don't think I would have connected the two if you hadn't told me. And it's excellent in both cases.
Yeah. And
the final thing in my geek out is something that we've kind of been doing as a family and been doing as kind of an expanded bubble. Is we've, as a couple of our friends are getting their second shot of the vaccine, we're kind of expanding who it is that is coming into our household. And so sometimes we'll have two friends there. Both of them have been double stuck. I've been double stuck. Kasha's had COVID, so she has we talked to the doctor and they're like, yeah, no, this is fine. This works. And so we've kind of gotten a couple of packages of party games that we've been playing together. And the Jackpot games are really doing something fun for just light-hearted social interaction in this space. And we've got them on a Switch. We've turned on the family-friendly mode because they have some not family-friendly modes, which we've discovered on accident with the children, which was awkward. And what it is a series of games that have very basic premises. One of them, called Drawful, is you are supposed to draw on your smartphone or tablet a picture to match a phrase that they give you. And, it might be the Candyman can. And you're like, okay, with my finger do I draw the Candyman can? And then it puts that picture up on the screen and it says, okay, caption this with what you think is the actual title. And then it rolls over and says, okay, here are all the titles that we were presented. Pick which one you think was correct. Vote for the right one. And you get points based on whether you were correct or whether people voted for you. Other games where, they give you a fill in the blank and you each write your own little quips, which you think will be funny to fill in that blank or complete that sentence or that narrative. And people vote for which quips they think are funnier. And they're really simple. And there's not a lot of thought process that goes into these games. But that's kind of what makes it fun, is you just do something silly and you have something on the game system, TV, that is humorous and surprising and all lets you just kind of interact with this as the social atmosphere. When the background radiation of we're still in expanding, we're still under quarantine, but not quite. And so we can't go out and do a whole lot. So what do we do here in this space? And it's just kind of been a good social medium, I suppose.
Very cool.
And that'll wrap it up for me.
Well, then, I guess that means we're heading to our main topic. We're continuing our historical fiction film club with the Akira Kurosawa film, The Hidden Fortress.
Yeah, this film may not be as well known to some of our listeners, so should we give a little bit of a synopsis of the film?
Great idea. Take it away, Mike.
I didn't watch the film. I'm just here to try to sound smart. What am I supposed to do?
Well, you're stuck. You got to synopsize it.
Sum it up, Mike.
How do I always get caught lying? Gosh. No, okay. All right. I was going into this film blind, and I had heard about The Hidden Fortress, and since I'd watched all of the background videos to Star Wars, I knew that The Hidden Fortress was an influence to George Lucas with all of the Kurosawa films, but I didn't know what kind of film this was. And in that case, this really didn't quite help me, because knowing what kind of film you're watching helps you pick out certain story elements and helps you, if I'm watching a romantic comedy, I know to pick out and wait for these elements. Or if I'm watching an action movie, I know to watch for these sort of developments in the plot. And I didn't know what I was looking for.
Yeah, knowing ahead of time that you're going into a comedy is certainly helpful. Mm-hmm. Especially because this is from another culture. If you don't realize that it's supposed to be comedic, then you might miss the subtleties of the humor that were in it. Yeah. Like, we'll get into a little bit more in our synopsis, but there's a scene in which Princess Yuki is kind of mocking her samurai protector. And if you don't realize that this is a humorous scene, you miss the very subtle expressions on her face. I thought it was hilarious because I saw what was going on in her head. But if you're treating it as this is a samurai epic and everybody is serious, then you totally miss out on that.
I'm with you guys. As I was watching this movie, this is the first time I've ever seen it as well. I kept trying to wrap my head around what type of movie it was. And there was so much that I was wondering, so many moments I was wondering, okay, what am I missing out on contextually because I'm not Japanese from the 1950s? Like if I were to see this with friends who grew up watching these films, would they be laughing at parts that I have no clue what's going on? What am I missing because I've not watched hardly any Asian cinema?
Well, what we should do is sit down and have a viewing party with George Lucas, and if he's laughing, we should laugh too.
No, because at that point he's going to go, okay, see this part here? I put this part in Star Wars. Okay, you see this other part here? I also put this in Star Wars. This part I didn't, but I did in the remake.
Okay, like Star Wars aside, I bet that someone like Lucas who deeply fell in love with these in film school, like if there was anybody else, like maybe on this podcast, who fell in love with this deeply and love with this in film school, like there could be an amazing commentary as the let's pause and watch, pause and watch, pause and watch. Mm-hmm. So.
Well, I didn't actually watch this one in film school. This was actually my first time watching it too. I had seen other Kurosawa films previously, and I was at least familiar with the premise and the type of movie that it was.
So I didn't know that. I thought this was like one of your favorite films.
No.
So let us continue with letting our listeners know exactly what type of movie or what's going on in this movie.
Yeah, with the comedic elements or strong comedic elements, this also has kind of in retrospect, it felt like a road trip kind of film where you know that the destination is to get to point B, but it's not really about the destination, even if a lot is, like the not dying part. And it's about what happens on the way. And so our narrative begins with two hapless peasants. And I've practiced saying these names, I promise you. And if anybody here speaks Japanese, you have every right to hate me. I agree. It's Tahe and Matashi. It basically sounds like Matashi. It sounds like Matashi, but it's Matashishi.
Yeah,
Matashichi.
A lot of times they just kind of jam all of the middle letters together, so you get it's like Matashi.
Yeah,
there's just kind of miss that A and the I, and it's just Matashi.
That's one of the things I've noticed listening to anime. The names don't sound like they're written to English ears.
It's just like listening to somebody talk about place names in Britain.
Yeah.
You just skip most of the letters.
Okay, look, that is not fair.
That's the River Thames. It's spelled Thames.
Worcester.
Mm-hmm. We have a Worcester. We have a Peabody. We also have
Gloucester.
We have all sorts of syllables missing from New England names too. So, yeah.
So it's just like that.
Yeah. Okay. Tahe and Matsushi. And it begins with them arguing, and not for the last time. Before either of them can come to grips with their position, they see a samurai run into frame, and I'm convinced that this samurai was our exposition man. However, in order to make a point, Kurosawa has him killed before he can utter a single word. And Tahe and Matsushi are, and will be for the rest of the film, pursued by the Yamana clan. On their misadventures, they learn that the Yamana clan has already recently defeated and more or less destroyed the Akizuki clan. But that clan's princess is in hiding, and a vast fortune of Akizuki gold is hidden. So Tahe and Matsushi fall in with a samurai babysitter, Rokuruda, who is protecting a young woman. The young woman is, surprise, surprise, Princess Yuki, though Tahe and Matsushi never put that together until the end. And even after that, after it's explained to them, I'm not entirely sure that they put it together. The rest of the film is them trying to smuggle the hidden gold and the princess across enemy lines into safe territory of the Hayakawa clan, where the Akizuki clan can rebuild. So that's our structure.
If the names get to be too much, we could just refer to them as they're known in today's culture, cinematic culture, R2-D2 and C-3PO.
I mean, with a lot of Jar Jar Binks mixed in.
Yes.
I think Brian previously said the potty mouth Jar Jar Binks.
Right, the foul mouth Jar Jar.
Yeah, the language that they were using really surprised me at times.
See, this is why when Lucas decided to adopt these characters, R2 only speaks in beeps.
Good point. I'd forgotten he's foul-mouthed.
Okay, no, that's been the joke, is that R2D2 is so foul mouthed that everything that he says in Star Wars, this is bleeped out. But all right, so now that that's kind of the general trajectory of the film, why this film?
Well, I feel I should field most of that question since I was the one who insisted on it. Early on, when we said, "Hey, we're going to do historical fiction," The Last Samurai was suggested, and while I liked the idea of coming back to Japan for another story because we'd previously done the Miyazaki films, all I could think of was Kurosawa. I was like, "No, that's what we're doing now." We'd previously had the Miyazaki films that we talked about. It's like, oh, so yeah, a samurai story would cap that off nicely, but I don't know that I want a Hollywood samurai story. I mean, we do so much American and to a lesser degree European cinema already. Let's let the Japanese speak for themselves. And so I really wanted a non-Western film instead of The Last Samurai. And so I looked at, it's like, okay, well, samurai movies, Akira Kurosawa is the way to go. We could do Yojimbo or Seven Samurai or Ran or whatever. It's like, but this is us, and we love Star Wars, and so why not go to that film that George Lucas talked about loving and watch The Hidden Fortress?
Yeah. Yeah, I know what you mean about the Last Samurai and its background, and it's one of those things that I had a lot of questions about Hollywood and Japanese history, and more importantly, culture, that I just didn't have the background or bandwidth to deconstruct. So it felt... Yeah, it would feel somewhat disingenuous to have this thing that we couldn't really comment on its own ground, and just kind of taking too much for granted with Hollywood telling us about our lens.
Yeah.
And like I said before, my exposure to Asian cinema has been extremely limited. Most of what I've seen has been coming out of China, because China is pretty much a cinematic powerhouse these days and has been for a while. Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon, Hero. And so to see a classic from Japan that, even though it says Toho on the front, it does not include a nuclear-powered dinosaur, it was refreshing and also informative.
And another reason I wanted to watch this one is because the narrative structure is more accessible to Western audiences than a strict samurai piece. If you're watching Yojimbo, you really have to understand a little bit more about the samurai culture. But in this one, we've got these two guys, these hapless peasants, that we understand what it's like, or what it was probably like for somebody who doesn't have power, doesn't have authority, and be trampled on by the people who do. Mm-hmm. That's a universal concept. And so you don't need to know about the Sengoku period and the Warring States and what the samurai code is to understand these two guys want to make some money and then go home.
Yeah. And what little that we have been exposed to in American cinemas has been very much westernized. Like we've brought up The Last Samurai with Tom Cruise. It's a good movie. I remember seeing it in theaters and it was fun. But in all honesty, it's probably about as historically accurate as Braveheart.
Well, let's be honest. This one's not exactly historically accurate either. It's got the same failings as a Western movie about Western culture.
Yeah.
Kurosawa's not concerned about telling us history. He's concerned about making a compelling story. And the samurai are about as romanticized as our idea of the Western knight. So
this is James and I sitting on our hands about misconceptions of Western knights. So do go on before that.
Before this show becomes a lot longer than we meant it to be.
Right. And then, of course, as I said earlier, the influence on Star Wars is not to be ignored. And the influence doesn't stop there, because this story has been mined for other things that we like Babylon 5's episode of View from the Galley, which had the two custodians, watching from a distance as Sheridan and Delenn fight this big battle. And there was an episode of Stargate SG-1 called The Other Guys, in which we have the two scientists who try to rescue SG-1 after they've been captured, never knowing that SG-1 got themselves captured on purpose. So this story shows up in other places too, other than just Star Wars. And I think it's fun to kind of compare and contrast those other stories with it.
So, speaking of the not entirely historically accurate and historicity of film, how educated are we on the grand scope of Japanese history and culture after having viewed this film? He asked with tongue firmly in cheek. Like, I feel like having a little bit of knowledge of the Warring States period helped place the film. But the film is really more of a journey set in a time and a place than, more than something that revolves around historical persons.
Mm-hmm.
Speaking for myself, the historicity of it wasn't really critical to me, but my curiosity was piqued enough that I looked up a couple of Wikipedia pages, did enough research to learn that the Yamana and Akizuki clans weren't even on the same island, so they probably were never at war, at least not directly. Akizuki's in Kyushu, which is the third largest island off the southern tip of Honshu, which is the big island.
And one of the other clans in the film is entirely fictional.
Yeah, there's a Hayakawa family apparently, but it's not a full clan. They belong to inside another clan.
And even though the details aren't historical, and the period was real enough, though, it was a time and a place that had very little Chinese interference. Japan had relatively open borders, which is pretty rare in their history, and there was very little imperial control. The emperor was mostly ceremonial at that point, and local lords were the ones that had ultimate control over what was going on in their territories, and they wanted more territory and more influence. And so there was a lot of conflict between these daimyos as they warred against each other, and they negotiated with the West for supplies such as firearms. Hence, you see a lot of samurai with muskets in the film.
Oh, those aren't actually samurai, though. Ashigaru, they're conscripted peasants. That's why when you had that big fight between Rokuruda and, I don't remember the other guy's name, that everybody was like trying to keep their distance from Rokuruda because he's a samurai. He's a professional hereditary warrior. And these guys are just peasants with spears. And so they're terrified of him.
And it's interesting because there was some bit of fear, it seemed, that kind of went both ways, because those riflemen were also no joke. I mean, at a distance. And it's also kind of funny because in the West we had a similar thing where knights hated the arquebus, which is like I don't want to call it a rifle because it wasn't rifled, but it was a firearm. And all it took was a peasant with an afternoon's worth of training to best somebody who had spent their youth training into adulthood.
One piece of historic realism that I did appreciate is the fact that in one scene where the hero group is on the run from an army who has these muskets, and you just hear them firing off all the time, and the heroes aren't even close to being hit. And that's because they're shooting 16th century smooth bore rifles with round ammunition. So you can aim at a barn and you'll be lucky if you hit the tree on the other side of the house.
Even if you're inside the barn.
Yes.
One thing that's interesting about that, there was a historically accurate note, is that unlike European armies using firearms, they don't stand in a line and everybody shoots at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
The Ashigaru were actually trained to just have this persistent and continuous firing. So the volley would never let up.
I did see when there was the peasants' revolt at the beginning, the slave revolt, you saw line after line after line of the Ashigaru, and the front line would fire and they'd run to the back. The next line would fire, run to the back. They'd go to the back, reload until it was time for them to shoot again. And it was, like you said, a continuous rotating line of fire, never letting up. I was like, that is fantastic. I wondered how period it is, because it looks great and it's proven to be very effective.
Mm-hmm. The Japanese advanced firearm use very, very quickly during this period. Mike mentioned that they'd been importing guns from Europe, the Portuguese. They only did that for a little while, and then they started manufacturing their own and improving on them very rapidly.
Oh, yeah.
They made boxes to protect the matchlocks so that they could fire in the rain. They developed these tactics to use them more effectively. They took to guns very rapidly and very eagerly.
It was really interesting. I got to see some museum pieces in the Museum of Fine Arts, Boston, where they actually had a samurai exhibit, and the Japanese firearms of the period were just absolutely stunning pieces, because there was so much not only function but form invested in their manufacture. So yeah, they also had some interesting pieces where they had some samurai armor that came with musket ball dents, and I say came with as in immediately after their manufacture, they would shoot them with a musket ball to demonstrate that they were sturdy enough to handle a shot. So it was really fascinating.
I would love to see a study of that. Like, we've seen videos, Mike, you and I, of Todd Cutler. He's done videos of 150-pound war bows against breastplates. And I've also watched videos of period-appropriate firearms against steel breastplates and armor. I have not seen one done against samurai-style armor.
I mean, it's interesting because this is the problem is when we have these videos, we're taken from surviving museum examples and then reconstructing them. So, I mean, any sort of test you're going to do is imperfect.
Yeah.
But we do know that as firearms evolved, there was an arms race. Like there were people that tried to protect their vitals with thicker and more layers. There was a piece that they had in the Higgins Armory Museum where they had taken an old breastplate and then welded it onto an additional breastplate to make it thicker, with the hopes of withstanding the punch of a firearm.
Ooh.
So
they must have been a beast to wear.
There is a reason why armor fell out of use on the battlefield eventually. So I mean,
if I'm going to get shot, I'm going to get shot. I'm not wearing 60 pounds of extra layers.
If I put another layer on this, I'm no longer a soldier, I'm a fort.
Yeah. Someone bring me a peasant. I want to hit him. Speaking of peasants, the first people that we do see in this movie are peasants, are a pair of them, and much of the film is taken from their perspective. And so it did make me curious on the class system that existed at this time period. We get an idea of peasants. We see peasants, both these two with the names that I won't try to replicate, and peasants performing a festival, peasants in a town, and we get some views of nobility and of soldiers and more. And I haven't had a chance to really do any research onto it, but it just made me curious about what the class system was like and its similarities and differences to what existed in Europe at the time.
Sure. Yeah, what I can say very confidently, I mean, if we're talking about comparisons between Japan and the large swath of cultures that was Europe at this time, I guess it's really simply say we need to read more books. Yeah, I am absolutely unqualified to answer that question.
Yeah, I've read a little bit, but it's been too long ago for me to really comment on it much.
There is one thing I did notice which really helped differentiate the class divide. Only members of a high level of military or nobility are allowed to wear pants.
Apparently you have to be very, very high because
Yes.
Yuki's not wearing any.
No. I saw exactly 2 people in this entire movie wearing pants. Everyone else was wearing beach shorts or basically man diapers.
It's interesting because pants were actually introduced to Japan via trade in the... No, I don't know.
This was a joke played on them by the Portuguese. Oh no, everybody in Europe is wearing these diaper things. It's the height of fashion.
It's just that they're terribly comfortable. I imagine everyone would be wearing them in the future.
Like, and I've worn the tights. I've worn the poofs. I don't know. Like that's, yeah. I'll stick to the trousers that I like.
To go back to before the show. Here, this is called a cod piece. You just wear this and nothing else.
I mean, I wish that wasn't true in some places and times. Well, moving on to the film craft before we get hung up there.
One more thing I wanted to say on that, because there was something I remembered that this movie highlights.
Sure.
That class divide is more important to them than their nationality. That the fact that you're a noble and I'm a peasant is far more important than you're Yamana and I'm Akizuki.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
I was made curious by this by one particular event where C-3PO and R2 are digging around in the fire pit looking for more gold. And these two soldiers come on them and they're like, "What are you doing there?" And, they try and run away. And these two guys find out, oh, there's gold in the fire pit, and they follow them. And instead of, oh, hey, here's an enemy samurai and the princess that everybody's looking for, Rokuruda says, okay, you guys carry those sacks and come with us. And they do it. Like, no, this is the enemy, remember? No, but he's a samurai and we're peasants, so we obey him.
It's interesting because as I was doing some background digging around on this film, I actually listened to George Lucas talk about the film for a little bit. Yeah. And he had said that one of the things about viewing this film as Westerners is that the distinctions of class make so much more difference to a Japanese viewer than they would to us as Westerners. So that a lot of the nuances are lost on us because we don't have that innate connection to the class structure in which this film was written and directed.
Okay, now the next question.
Oh, well, the next question is there anything in the film craft that stood out?
Once again, my answer is at the top of the list, so I'll go first again. For me, I thought this was a superb example of just the black and white photography. I don't know if they have the same kind of systems in Japanese photography as we do here, the zones, but the contrast levels, everything being very clear. I mean, the fact that it's black and white kind of falls away after a little while. I mean, I have memories of color in this film, even though there wasn't any, just because the photography is so good. It's undercut somewhat by bad camera handling, like that first shot where we're following R2 and 3PO. And the camera is just kind of bouncing around and I'm getting seasick trying to watch it. And there was a shot where it was a deliberate choice to draw our attention to the sticks in the water, but it was a little bit too much because you had just the top of the two characters' heads at the bottom of the frame. It's like, I should have kept their heads and shoulders in the frame. And we'd have still seen this is strangely framed. Maybe there's something going on with the water. So the cinematography wasn't always perfect, but at least the technicals of the contrast and the color, the lack of color, were really good. And it was also one of the first, James mentioned seeing Toho at the beginning. It was a Toho Scope, which was a new lens system developed in answer to the CinemaScope here in the US. And this was I think this was a year after Toho Scope was introduced. So this was Kurosawa's first super wide frame, and one of the first. This is probably the biggest movie that had used Toho Scope at that time. So that's just an interesting historical note.
Could you help me out and tell me what CinemaScope is and how Toho Scope was a response to it?
Okay, so in the heyday of Hollywood films, everybody's looking for something to make their movie stand out better than everybody else. And so one of the things that they started doing was playing with the aspect ratio. And the CinemaScope, I don't remember the exact aspect ratio that CinemaScope is, but it's much wider than the previous films that had been made. And so they're like, oh, we get this even wider. It's a bigger picture. It's not actually bigger because you're cropping stuff off the top and bottom, right. But it looks bigger in your theater. You got to actually turn your head to see the whole frame. And so that would be something that they would throw up on the beginning of the movie, shot in CinemaScope. And I think it might have been an anamorphic lens, come to think of it, where the lens squashes things horizontally to fit in the film frame. And then when you project it, the lens unsquashes.
Interesting.
And we still do this now. You see, the new Star Wars trilogy was shot on anamorphic, and I don't know if either of you would have noticed it, but there was a thing that they did on those big rack focuses where you're changing focus from somebody on the foreground to somebody in the background, and like the background suddenly like gets larger, like vertically but not horizontally.
Oh,
And it was making me ill every time they did it, because it was like, oh gosh, this is making everything all swimmy, because it's a non-circular lens, so things expand vertically differently than they do horizontally.
fascinating.
So it's something they still use. We're dealing with a lot of anamorphic on Y: The Last Man right now. It's real.
There was a scene or two in The Rise of Skywalker where I just remember the time that there was some type of weird pan or something was going on in the background, like you explained, that just for a moment, my mind and my eyes were going, whoa, what's going on here? And then it was past, but it just, I don't know, like my vision got blurry for a second. And okay, that explains it.
Yeah, it was driving me crazy through The Last Jedi, in the village scene when Rey and Skywalker are talking. They were rack focusing all the time between them. It's like, oh gosh, stop that.
So I just need one last moment of clarity that with this anamorphic filming, it's not filming a film adaptation of Animorphs.
No, that's a different thing.
Okay. All right. I was scared.
I don't know if they film Animorphs in anamorphic or not. I think if they don't, that's a lost opportunity and they should rethink it.
I think the less said about Animorphs at this point, the better. Frankly, the less we have to include them in the show notes. Let's carry on.
Okay.
Since we have talked extensively on this podcast previously about duels, how did you guys feel about the big duel scene in the middle of this movie?
An unexpected surprise and pleasure.
Yeah. The staging of the duel was wonderful. And I think it very well demonstrates a principle that we really just didn't have time for in our movie Swordfight episode, was the dynamic setting. They start off in this circle and they have this back and forth fight. There's swings and misses. There are jabs and deflects and so forth. But the scene changes as the dramatic tensions shift during the fight. And they sort of move out of their circle. And one thing I didn't realize is this was so well edited, that went from location shooting to soundstage shooting. And they're fighting like through these pieces of cloth and around shields that are set up, and it very well uses a dynamic setting, and the tensions of the setting match the amped up tensions of the fight, and that was so well.
The environment was very much a part of the fight, just as much as the fighters and the weapons.
Yes,
and you don't see that a lot. And it had a very real feel to it that starts in one place and it progresses just to all over. The fights are messy. They're meant to be messy. They're not clean. And this one went all over the place. It felt so genuine. One of the more genuine fights that I've seen on screen.
Yeah, I think that we could probably go on for like 20 minutes about how to well use the set and the setting and the environment as part of the fight. But I don't know that we want to take up 20 minutes of this podcast, but it's we'll use it as bonus content for, that other one that we did.
As much as we've already mentioned how much Lucas has taken from this movie. While watching this spear fight, I kept hearing the Duel of the Fates in my head.
See, at the beginning, I was hearing Good, Bad, and the Ugly.
Ah, yeah.
Yeah. One thing that also got me is, when you say the Duel of Fates, that's put like right at the end of the Star Wars film. All the duels most of them are at the end of the film, which is where we expect the big bad sword fight to happen. But this one didn't. This one happened in the middle of the film, which is less common. We'd expect a final showdown of powers, but it wasn't. It occurred either towards the end of the middle or beginning of the end, and it was serving to be an emotional catalyst for one of our antagonists. And that was brilliant.
And I thought that it also did a good job of, again, pointing out the class divide, because the enemy general has just literally rode up on a horse on a platter and is now surrounded by troops. And what does he do? He calls out the general of the other army and it's like, hey, how you been? Oh, I'm doing good. Hey, you want to have a duel? Let's do it.
Yeah, there is tactically zero reason to say yes.
Yeah.
Like, we've got him surrounded. There's 80 of us and one of him. If we don't poke him at least 80 times, there's a problem.
Yeah, I mean, my response would have been, I'd have taken a little sip of my sake. I've gone, nah. You 50 soldiers surrounding him, dogpile him, please. Thank you.
Now, I mean, I'm not going to... I think that we should stop short of talking about class divides historically, but this is one of the class lenses through which Kurosawa is telling a story.
True.
There's something else going on there, too, in that these two guys are friends. They're very good friends. And so, Rokurodu's looking for, okay, how do I get out of this situation? Because if I try to fight all these guys, I'm going to die. And his buddy, Tadokoro, is looking for an opportunity. How can I get my friend out of this situation without killing him and without, surrendering my honor? And so this offer of a duel is a way out for both of them. So I don't have to kill my friend, and the other guys, I don't have to get killed by my friend, and everybody can walk away from this all right. Of course, that introduced the complication, and that Tadokoro was punished for letting Rokurodu go. Roku? I can't remember where the T and where the K goes. And it's also the placement of it in terms of where it happens in the movie is another symptom of this is not a samurai epic. This is not an action movie. It is very much a comedy and a road trip movie. And so this is still part of our rising action. This is still a complication along the journey and not the conclusion of the film.
And speaking of Duel of the Fates.
Yeah, we've talked a little bit about the influences of this film on Star Wars, though I think that one thing I wasn't prepared for when I was watching the film is how nuanced those influences are. I mean, it's not like we can see the same archetypes, the same through the whole film. Like, okay, we have a princess. She's not cut from the same cloth as Princess Leia. Rokurodu's not cut from the same cloth as, say, Ben Kenobi. He doesn't have the same function in the film. He's not training I'm not going to call them heroes. They're not going to train our lens on how to be samurai or even be decent people. But the thing that is the influence on Star Wars is pretty almost exclusively the film is seen through the eyes of the characters of the least status. Mm-hmm. There were a couple of times that they were walking into danger or walking away from the other characters. And I say to my friend, well, they're not going to die. We're not going to lose them because they're our lens. We don't have a story if we have this. And so the largest influences here appear to be the parallels between the viewpoint of Taihei and Matsushita and R2-D2 and 3C. I could say the Japanese name, but I can't say the same. Like, this is going all the way back to Jennifer Connelly all over again.
Well, yeah, I think it's a mistake to approach it as though A New Hope is a remake of The Hidden Fortress, because that's not what it is. Lucas saw some things that he liked in this story and he borrowed them. He saw some things that he liked in other Kurosawa films and he borrowed those. So yeah, R2 and 3PO are definitely, Taihei and Matsushita. I can't say it. Matsushita.
The thing is, how much did we practice this before we hit record?
We had a whole 20-minute conversation about it. And I wonder if Lucas was continuing to mine this story when he set up that thing with the decoy in The Phantom Menace.
Lucas has never, as far as I've seen in my Star Wars behind the scenes lore, which is extensive, I've never seen him mention it specifically, though I've read a few assessments of how Lucas drew on early drafts of A New Hope, which drew more heavily from aspects of the Hidden Fortress while he was writing The Phantom Menace. So maybe.
Yeah. I think as a creative, everything that we take in comes back out in later work, whether we are aware of it or not.
Right.
And so he may not have decided, hey, I want to use this element of the Hidden Fortress in my new movie. He might have just, hey, I have this great idea. I have no idea where it came from. And, 15 years later, he says, oh, hey.
Huh. Funny thing. There were some shots that reminded me of some of the environmental shots in Star Wars, particularly and when we're looking at the rocky crags and Tatooine. There were also a lot of the uses of dissolves and wipes that periodically reminded me of the way that Star Wars used those kinds of elements. And that seemed to be the extent of direct influences and parallels that I could see.
Yeah, when our two little droids were climbing around in the rocky crags and climbing and slipping up the rocky hill, I kept on thinking to myself, okay, if I see one Jawa, I'm turning it off. I'm out. I mean,
see, I was expecting Tahe to say, I'm not going that way. It's far too rocky.
You watch your language.
No, but even that, they did that like in the first 5 minutes of the film. Like they split up. And it's only by a happenstance that they wound up captured by the same people.
Yeah.
Okay, these two are definitely R2 and 3PO.
Yeah. That was not lost to me. I kept on expecting the taller one, you'll be malfunctioning within a day, you misshapen scrap pile.
Yeah, except he said other words.
Yes. Which, honestly, that might have been what R2 was saying. We don't know.
That's my headcanon now. After I watched this film, it's definitely headcanon.
Speaking of our two little droids and shorts, let's shift over to actually discussing the characters themselves.
I'm going to say shorts is a generous word for that amount of material. But anyway, moving on. Okay. Tahe and Matsushi. My question is, and this is granted, I only saw the film once. Are they different characters?
No, they're not.
Okay.
Two halves of the same character.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I said to my friend when we're watching this thing, they bicker like two cats in the bag. And I feel like all we need to know is the name for the one bag that they're both in.
Well, maybe we should just call them both Tahe because it's easier to say.
The dynamic of these two reminds me a lot of parenting siblings during the early parts of quarantine.
As a parent of twin boys, let me tell you what, I've noticed a lot of similarities, and there were moments I just wanted to reach into the screen, grab them by their ears, and knock some sense into them.
And there's not even any real character growth there. I mean, they fight with each other over sometimes the simplest things. They end the film more or less as they started, just a little bit richer and maybe having learned nothing.
Mm-hmm. Which actually I appreciated. I appreciate the fact that they ended up at the end almost exactly as they started out, because sometimes people just don't grow.
I'm glad that they didn't have their moment where they changed and grew and became heroes. I'm super glad we did not have that. Because we're not watching a superhero origin story. If I want that, I know where Tom Holland is when I need him. And it's funny because George Lucas had actually compared their role in this party to raising teenagers. His words, George Lucas's words, not mine, as a parent of teenagers.
I think Kurosawa specifically, there's that moment where at the beginning of the film when they first find the gold and Machichi is claiming, hey, I found these pieces, so I should get the two pieces, and you get just one.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then at the end of the film, it's reversed, and Tahe saying, well, hey, I saw the horses first, so I get all the gold, and you get just a little bit.
And this is a massive amount of gold. I mean, this is 3 horses, beasts of burden carrying all this gold. Like, he has no idea what he would do. This is meant to rebuild a clan.
Yeah.
He doesn't have the scope to understand what to do with it.
But this is exactly what brothers would do.
Yes. Yes, exactly.
Because it's the same conversation in reverse. Kurosawa was telling us specifically, these guys learned nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
There was no growth. And that's the point for them, is that there is no growth.
The discussion they had at the end was slightly more generous, but they are not the wiser.
Even at the very end, where they are brought before the princess and the general, and they're like, who's that guy? Is that the general? Oh my gosh, it's the general. Look, it's me. Who are you? I'm the mute girl. Who are you? I'm the princess. Oh!
Oh, that girl that can obviously hear, who was guarded by that lady in waiting with the rock. Yes, I remember you. Yes. Okay, since we're here, I'm gonna have to say it is if you haven't seen the film, there is a scene in there that is like, I didn't find it funny. I found it really cringy because the princess is asleep and they're drawing straws as to which one of these two guys is gonna, as they say, like get lost for a few minutes.
Mhm.
Like, you don't know what exactly they have planned for this. Who they don't realize the princess isn't actually mute or deaf, so they're planning to take advantage of
Yeah.
her. Their plans are thwarted by a lady in waiting who basically the princess rescued from her slavery from the brothels. And so she is guarding the princess with a rock, like a massive
It's more like a
rock.
small boulder that she's
Yeah.
held above her head.
And if these two guys even move a muscle, they will be crushed.
This scene, my first thought was, wow, this just got a lot more cringy than I was expecting this movie to go.
So there was the moment of toxic masculinity, and this lady in waiting was the antidote. And she was ready to rock their world. Anyway. So I wanted to call out that scene because it was, as you said, it was super cringy. Yeah, not elevated even within the narrative of the film, but it was there. So yeah, that's these characters. They're not good people.
No.
Mm-mm.
So having spoken of Yuki, let's talk about Princess Yuki. One thing that we had said is that we don't have as rigid distinction in the West of the class structure. And we had mentioned that Yuki was pretending to be mute and obviously not deaf, I suppose. But part of the thing is in their escape, they have to pretend that she's some sort of servant or some sort of peasant. But the problem is that she can't open her mouth, because the moment that she opens her mouth, she will be exposed as somebody of elevated status. Like, she literally can't fake it. Anyone would see it. And it's not presented as a dig on her or her personality. It's her culture, status, and upbringing is impossible to disguise.
I saw it as her upbringing because other characters made a point. She's the only child to her father, who was the nobleman, the ruler of the clan, and he didn't raise her as a daughter. He raised her as a son, which is why she stands the way she does. She walks the way she does. She always has that reed that she treats like a kind of a sword, hitting things and practicing with it, the way she rides a horse, and also in her speech.
And it's funny because we in the West have several stories where the prince and the pauper switch places. And the stories run as people that are plausibly making the role shift, with the comedy being in the blunders that they make. But as Kurosawa presents this narrative, it's under a different set of assumptions. The princess could never pass as the pauper.
Mm-hmm.
And so she had to be made mute so she would never reveal herself.
And even that was of limited success because she's got that imperious expression on her face the entire time. There's no mistaking her for somebody who doesn't feel superior to everybody around her.
Anyone from the highest samurai to the lowest peasant could take one look at those eyebrows and know, yeah, she's a noblewoman.
Yeah, she was actually given an Academy Award for the most serious eyebrows in a dramatic picture in 1959, which was oddly enough a category back then.
Who was she up against?
I don't know. I didn't make this up far enough. Like I only built the lie out so far, people.
Liz Taylor and Liz Taylor was in there twice, one for her left eyebrow, one for her right.
Though funny enough, in trying to construct the language for that award, I did find that Nighty Night Bugs was awarded the Academy Award for the short picture. So Bugs Bunny did get an Academy Award that year. That one is the truth. That's not relevant to Hidden Fortress. So anyway.
One scene that I did enjoy was toward the beginning of the film where they're discussing how they're going to have to sneak through enemy land to get to safety. And the general is talking about how she might have to pretend to be a mute and how he did it. And of course, the idea of anyone telling her to shut up is just
Dangerous.
very dangerous. But he decides, like, while making eyes at the other servant, he's like, I once had to pretend I was a mute. It was grueling. It was one of the most difficult things I've ever had to do. It took stamina and strength and concentration. And he knows what he's doing. And the other servant knows what he's doing. But the princess also knows what he's doing.
And that was the scene I was referring to earlier, because she has this expression on her face as she's standing behind him, and she's almost smiling, but not quite.
Mm-hmm.
And you can see, like, right there, oh, she knows what he's up to.
And she even calls him out. I'm not taking your bait, but I will let myself be fooled this time in the interest of our safety.
That was brilliant.
She was actually the focus character in this film, and it wasn't really revealed until the very end, because she stated the theme at the end of the story instead of the beginning. Normally with a movie, you have some line at the beginning that tells you this is what this movie is going to be about. But she gives that speech about experiencing the difference between her noble upbringing and the way that the people live. And when she gives that film, you suddenly remember the things that she has done through the past. Like, oh, that's why she was just quietly following R2 and 3PO instead of doing something to stop them. She wants to see how these people think. And you remember the fire festival, and she's dancing and she's enjoying herself. And suddenly that's not part of her disguise. That's, hey, this is how peasants have fun. Mm-hmm. And it is fun.
It's one of the few times we see her facial expressions actually change. Yeah. The facade that she has put up begins to crack, and we get to see the emotion underneath.
I thought it was really great putting that revelation at the end. So we see, oh, this was a story about her growth. She was the one that was experiencing change in this movie.
This makes me want to watch the film again now that I know what to expect.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't.
I had Lady Hawk, you had Hidden Fortress.
The next Toho movie I watch will be a dinosaur versus a gorilla.
But really, it's about the gorilla's trajectory. It's seen through the lens of the lizard. So, Rokuruda.
Yes. So, in a Kurosawa film, you expect the noble samurai, and Mifune does that better than almost anybody else.
I don't think I saw him bend at the waist once.
Like, if he wants to pick something up, the earth bends up to meet him, is what happens.
That's right.
As I was watching it the other night, no joke, the good friends who were staying with, one of them saw him on screen as he was standing there dramatically, which that's the only way he knows how to stand, is dramatically. And she was like, dang, dim legs. I told her his are the smoothest legs in that entire kingdom. Not because he shaves them. He keeps the hair away by sheer force of will.
He just frowns at it and it goes away. In spite of the language and the cultural barriers, he really does project his emotions really well. I didn't have any trouble understanding him. He's got that Japanese idealized reserve to him, and yet you still see his pain when he's talking about, or when other people are talking about his sister and her death. She, by the way, we didn't mention, she was the decoy that was murdered in place of Princess Yuki.
That went about the way it did in episode 2 of Star Wars. So
yeah,
and so you see his pain, even though he's not expressing it like fully. So I think he's a tremendous actor.
I actually saw more emotion in his eyes than I did anywhere else, which is also indicative of early Hollywood. There were times, because it was black and white, there were times that it made me think of like the golden age of cinema, back when most movies were silent and they had to be very expressive with their face and with their body language and their eyes. And there were moments that his performance in particular, to me, harkened back to that. You never saw any emotion in his voice, not a lot in his face, but there was some in his face, but there was a lot in his eyes. And like you said, Brian, it was never hard to know what he was feeling, because he was able to express emotion in small little ways, which made it more dramatic and more sincere and earnest.
Mm-hmm. And this character is representative of that romanticized samurai that you see in Japanese films, like we mentioned earlier, the way we romanticize the paladins of Charlemagne. the samurai get the same treatment in Japan. And yet, Kurosawa is really careful to emphasize the humanity of the character. We do have this heroic samurai, larger than life figure that all of the soldiers are terrified of, and yet he allows us to see Mifune's performance, and the way Kurosawa wrote him allows us to see his pain, to see the desperation that he has to save his clan and to save Yuki.
Yeah, through his stance and through his actions and his voice, he exudes authority. And someone who, it's not a question of if you're going to obey him. You are going to obey him. I found that interesting is that when he does meet up with with those two droids, first he's following them, and then he sits among them, and then they're following him and obeying him.
Complaining about it the entire time, but they're still obeying.
Oh, absolutely. And the one time that they talk back to him, like, who are you? You can't make it. He shoves them both in the water.
Yeah.
And after that, there's no question. I had a little bit of a annoyance at first. I'm like, guys, don't ask, who are you to boss us around? Just leave. This is the American Western mindset of James. Like, just get out of there. But once again, I think this is a cultural thing we don't quite pick up on. No. He's the boss. And they call him boss several times. So we must follow now.
Well, did we have anything else to say about Rokuruda or this film in general?
Only that one of the official Japanese posters for this movie has got him on the front of it looking absolutely epic.
So they captured him properly is what you're saying.
Yes, absolutely. Take a look at this dude right here and tell me that you wouldn't start digging a hole if he told you to.
Oh, if he told me to, yeah. I mean, there's a reason why they started following him and calling him boss, and that's because when he showed up, he just was.
Mm-hmm. When I saw some of the other original posters, they've got him on there. He takes up the most room. The princess does, and a couple of other characters, but not our two peasants. They're nowhere to be seen on the poster. I'm like, well, why is that? And then after watching the movie, I'm like, oh, never mind. Now I know why they're not anywhere on the poster.
Because people would not buy tickets to watch
They would
guys.
not.
Well, they're the ones holding the camera.
Yeah, there you go.
All right.
Well, will that wrap it up? Not just for our characters, but overall for the Hidden Fortress?
I think it does.
Well, and that will also wrap up the final film for our historical fiction film club. I'm sure we'll have another film club figured out here soon.
Man, we got to make a decision now.
Yeah, we do. So are we going to do a Robin Hood film club, or I'm kidding.
Oodle-lolly.
Oodle. Golly, what a day. I think that will take us to the zombie apocalypse plan of the week. Mike, besides a hidden fortress in the mountains, how are we going to stay away from the advancing zombie horde?
Well, I actually think that we should take some hints from Kurosawa and protect ourselves from zombies by holding up in some quiet, out-of-the-way place hidden from the view of all zombies. But we're also going to need to take another step to keep the undead occupied while we hide out, which is why we're going to also have to take notes from another writer-director, John Hughes, while we set up our decoy house with a Home Alone Christmas party full of cardboard cutouts to keep their attention. Once inside, they also, instead of tasty brain meats, they find a bunch of Kevin McAllister-style traps inside to help thin out the herd, and we'll stay quiet and out of the way while they enjoy their party.
This would actually make a really good movie.
It's kind of like we had Pride and Prejudice and zombies. Now we have Home Alone and zombies. Okay.
Well, I can imagine in the director's cut when he's being interviewed. Well, I was thinking about, Pride and Prejudice and zombies, and then I thought, what if we did The Hidden Fortress and zombies, but we also include we
to the face.
We throw in Macaulay Culkin for fun.
Oh my gosh. Which side is he on? The zombies? Hey, no, move it on. CG 100,000 Macaulay Culkins into this, all with various states of decay. This could be a win. This could be a real win.
I think that is going to wrap it up this episode. I want to thank you all for listening in. Make sure that you check us out online at geekatarms.com, at facebook.com/geekatarms. And once again, Mike, what's our Twitter?
We are Arms Geek on Twitter.
Also, make sure that you subscribe to us on iTunes.
We are also on Podchaser and Podbean. The reviews actually do help us because the more that you rate and review, the more likely it is that other people, other listeners will find our podcast. So if you do like the show, it really does help us a lot. So we would appreciate any reviews that you could give us.
Absolutely.
So we assume. Have we ever been rated or reviewed?
Yes, we have been rated and we have been reviewed.
And we have not been found wanting. And before we make this podcast any longer with more movie references, friends, be safe, be blessed, and be geeky.
Thanks for listening to Geek at Arms. Music for this podcast was provided by Incompetech.com. For more, check us out at Facebook.com/Geek at Arms. Give us a like and maybe even subscribe to us on iTunes. That would be awesome.
Oh, one moment.
Sure.
What?
Leave that in.
Dog has lots to say.
Come here.
He hasn't been given his time on the
They're not
mics.
letting you play outside. Oh, poor boy. Go play. Go.
We need to have an episode of just James's dog talking to your cat.
Oh my gosh. Get the hedgehog involved.